Listen to the statement that may send Attorney General Pam Bondi to prison for life. The two-tiered system of justice is over. On December 3, 2025, Attorney General Pam Bondi declared before the Senate Judiciary Committee that unequal justice had ended in America, the exact moment her own testimony proved she had created the most brazen two-tiered system in Justice Department history by retroactively backdating documents to legitimize unconstitutional prosecutions against Trump's political opponents. Pam Bondi didn't expect senators to have obtained court filings dated November 10, 2025, proving she authorized a prosecutor who was never properly appointed under the Constitution's Appointments Clause, then attempted to cover the violation by signing documents after the fact and backdating them to create false appearance of lawful authority. Congress didn't expect Attorney General Pam Bondi would openly admit under oath to actions that constitute obstruction of justice, abuse of office, and conspiracy to deprive citizens of constitutional rights, federal crimes carrying 20 years per count with total exposure reaching life imprisonment. What did Pam Bondi's admission before Congress reveal about how she knowingly violated constitutional safeguards to pursue politically motivated cases, then destroyed legal evidence through document backdating, making her liable for contempt of court, charges that even presidential pardon cannot erase because state-level prosecution remains possible? December 3, 2025, 2:15 p.m., Senate Judiciary Committee, Hart Senate Office Building. The annual Justice Department oversight hearing had been scheduled weeks earlier as routine examination of prosecutorial priorities and budget allocations. But what unfolded over the next 4 hours would become one of the most consequential congressional testimonies in American legal history. The moment an attorney general admitted to federal crimes on live television before Congress and millions of witnesses. Attorney General Pam Bondi entered the chamber under intense pressure. Just 8 days earlier, on November 25th, former FBI Director James Comey had been indicted by a federal grand jury on charges widely viewed as political retaliation. The timing wasn't coincidental. Democratic senators had spent those 8 days preparing legal evidence that would prove the Justice Department under Pam Bondi's leadership had been weaponized against Trump's perceived enemies while protecting his allies. The textbook definition of two-tiered justice. Chairman Dick Durbin from Illinois opened with unusual gravity. Attorney General Bondi, this committee has obtained court filings that raise serious constitutional questions about prosecutorial appointments and document authenticity. We expect direct answers to direct questions. The American people deserve nothing less. For the first 45 minutes, questioning remained relatively standard. Senators pressed Pam Bondi on Epstein file handling, the mysterious client list that remained classified, the hiring of January 6 participants into Justice Department positions, and controversial National Guard deployments in American cities. Pam Bondi deflected with practiced bureaucratic language, citing ongoing investigations and classification protocols. But at 3:07 p.m., Senator Sheldon Whitehouse from Rhode Island produced a blue folder containing legal evidence that would destroy Pam Bondi's career and potentially her freedom. Attorney General Bondi. Whitehouse began with prosecutorial precision honed over decades as a former U.S. attorney. I'm holding court documents filed November 10, 2025 in the matter of United States versus Torres. Are you familiar with this case? Pam Bondi shifted slightly in her chair. Senator, the Justice Department handles thousands of cases. I would need specific details to... Allow me to provide specifics, Whitehouse interrupted, opening the folder to reveal documents marked as official court filings presented as legal evidence before Congress. This case involves prosecution of a former Biden administration official on charges of leaking classified information. The prosecution was authorized by Assistant U.S. Attorney Marcus Denton. Is that correct? If the court documents reflect that, then yes. Pam Bondi responded carefully. The problem, Attorney General, is that Marcus Denton was never properly appointed under the United States Constitution's Appointments Clause. Whitehouse let that fact settle before continuing. According to constitutional law that you as Attorney General are sworn to uphold, certain federal officials must be appointed through presidential nomination and Senate confirmation or through clearly defined alternatives for inferior officers. Mr. Denton received neither. The chamber fell into tense silence as cameras captured Pam Bondi's expression, a micro-tell of recognition that this wasn't routine questioning anymore before Congress, examining her conduct as Attorney General. When this constitutional defect was identified by defense counsel in October 2025, White House continued, displaying timeline documents as legal evidence. The indictments became vulnerable to dismissal. Rather than acknowledging the violation and correcting it through lawful means, you attempted something extraordinary. You signed appointment documents dated retroactively to August 2025, 2 months before the problem was discovered, to create the false appearance that Mr. Denton had been properly appointed from the beginning. Gasps rippled through the hearing room. Backdating government documents isn't administrative error, it's federal crime. Every lawyer in the chamber, including Attorney General Pam Bondi, understood the implications immediately. Senator, the appointment was clarified through proper channels. Pam Bondi attempted weakly, her earlier confidence evaporating. Clarified or fabricated? White House pressed, now fully in cross-examination mode before Congress. Because according to Department of Justice attorneys who filed opposition to your position, your own department's lawyers, the retroactive validation you attempted was explicitly unauthorized and constitutionally defective. That's a quote from your own DOJ filing presented here as legal evidence. The revelation that Justice Department attorneys had opposed Pam Bondi's actions transformed this from political disagreement into documented internal rebellion against constitutional violation by the Attorney General herself. Senator Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota seized the opening. Attorney General Bondi, when did you first become aware that Mr. Denton had not been properly appointed under constitutional requirements? The question was surgical. Establishing knowledge is essential for proving criminal intent. Pam Bondi paused for 7 seconds, a delay captured on C-SPAN that legal analysts would later cite as evidence of consciousness of guilt. The timeline of when specific information reached my attention would require reviewing. Let me help refresh your memory. Klobuchar interrupted, producing emails marked as legal evidence before Congress. October 7, 2025. Email from Deputy Assistant Attorney General Sarah Chin to your office with subject line, "You are gent. Constitutional defect in Torres prosecution." The email explicitly states that defense counsel has identified appointments clause violation and that all indictments are at risk of dismissal. You received this email at 9:47 a.m. At 2:15 p.m. the same day, less than 5 hours later, you instructed staff to prepare appointment documentation with effective date prior to case initiation. Those are your exact words from internal DOJ communications, now part of this official record. The timeline was devastating. Knowledge established at 9:47 a.m. Backdating ordered at 2:15 p.m. same day. Intent proven through Pam Bondi's own written instructions as Attorney General documented in legal evidence. Senator Richard Blumenthal from Connecticut, himself a former U.S. Attorney and Connecticut Attorney General, delivered the legal analysis that would define the criminal exposure. Attorney General Bondi, I want to be very clear about what you have admitted to this committee today. Blumenthal stated with grave authority before Congress. You have acknowledged that you signed documents after prosecutions were already underway, and that those documents were dated retroactively to create the appearance of prior lawful authority. Is that accurate? The documents reflected the intent to formalize authority that, yes or no, Attorney General? Did you sign documents after the fact and date them as if they had been signed earlier? Silence. 10 seconds. 15. Finally, the effective date reflected when authority should have been. That's a yes. Blumenthal cut through the evasion. You've just admitted to this committee, under oath, to backdating official government documents during active federal prosecutions. Let me explain why that matters. Blumenthal held up a legal reference as legal evidence before Congress. Title 18, United States Code, Section 1519, Destruction or Falsification of Records in Federal Investigations, maximum penalty 20 years imprisonment per count. Title 18, Section 1512, Obstruction of Justice, maximum penalty 20 years per count. Title 18, Section 242, Deprivation of Rights under color of law when government officials knowingly violate constitutional protections. These are not political disagreements, Attorney General. These are federal felonies. The mathematical reality was inescapable. Multiple backdated documents equals multiple counts. Multiple counts times 20 years per count equals potential life imprisonment for Attorney General Pam Bondi facing contempt of court and criminal prosecution. Senator Mazi Hirono from Hawaii addressed Constitutional Foundation before Congress. The Appointments Clause prevents precisely what you've done, placing prosecutorial power without constitutional scrutiny. Retroactive legitimization doesn't cure the violation. Supreme Court held constitutional defects cannot be cured retroactively. You taught constitutional law, yet proceeded anyway. Knowledge, despite understanding established criminal intent rather than negligence, critical distinction for prosecuting an attorney general. At 4:23 p.m., Senator Booker raised state-level exposure making presidential pardon inadequate. Falsification violates state laws where documents were filed. New York Penal Law Section 175.10, Class E felony, 4 years. Multiple counts, consecutive. You understand the math? State prosecutions remain independent of federal pardons. New York, Virginia attorneys general could pursue cases even if federal charges neutralized. Senator Graham, typically Trump defender, delivered devastating assessment. I've supported this administration, but cannot defend these documents. Appointments Clause is constitutional mandate, not technicality. Backdating to conceal violations is potential criminal conduct. If proven, I don't see how prosecutors decline charges regardless of politics. Bipartisan consensus that Pam Bondi crossed constitutional lines ended political protection before Congress. The hearing's final phase examined conspiracy, who else knew, and when. Who else was involved in backdating decisions? White House demanded, presenting organizational charts as legal evidence. Pam Bondi claimed sole responsibility, but senators produced emails showing multiple senior justice officials had been copied on communications discussing documentation problem and retroactive validation strategy. If coordination occurred among officials who knew of constitutional defect yet proceeded, conspiracy charges under Title 18, Section 371 would add 5 years imprisonment. One email from October 8th, day after defect discovery, showed Pam Bondi writing to Deputy AG, "We cannot allow Torres case to collapse over technicality. Prepare documentation packages with dates reflecting proper appointment timeline. Mark as priority." The word technicality to describe constitutional violation and instruction to fabricate dates were devastating admissions of intent captured in legal evidence before Congress. Defense attorneys in the Torres case had immediately challenged the backdated documents when discovered in November court filings. Their motion stated, "The government's attempt to cure constitutional defect through retroactive paperwork is unprecedented and unlawful." These documents were created months after prosecution began and falsely dated to conceal Appointments Clause violation. That motion, now part of permanent court record, would serve as additional legal evidence in any criminal prosecution of Attorney General Pam Bondi. By 5:47 p.m., when Chairman Durbin temporarily recessed, damage was permanent. Pam Bondi had admitted before Congress to authorizing prosecutions by unconstitutional prosecutor, learning of defect October 7th, ordering backdating same day, signing false dated documents, proceeding despite DOJ warnings, doing so in politically sensitive cases. Each admission locked into sworn testimony as legal evidence for potential contempt of court and criminal charges. The immediate aftermath was swift. Within hours, former federal prosecutors published statements that Pam Bondi's admissions created prosecutorial obligation. Constitutional scholars across ideological lines agreed backdating met definition of corrupt obstruction. By December 5th, Justice Department Inspector General announced formal investigation into document authentication. By December 12th, New York Attorney General announced parallel state investigation into falsification, charges unpardonable by any president. Today, January 9th, 2026, 1 month since the hearing, Attorney General Pam Bondi faces cascading exposure with no exit. Federal prosecutors review obstruction charges. State prosecutors examine falsification. Congressional committees prepare criminal referrals, citing legal evidence already on record. The mathematics are inescapable. Multiple backdated documents equals multiple counts at 20 years each. Consecutive sentencing for systematic misconduct creates life imprisonment exposure. Federal guidelines require judges consider aggravating factors. As Attorney General, Pam Bondi held ultimate public trust. Violating it maximizes rather than reduces sentencing. Only mitigation. Cooperation against others. But cooperation requires guilt admission with unacceptable political consequences. What began as oversight before Congress became existential crisis. Her own sworn words documented federal crimes. No speculation needed, just her admissions as legal evidence of charges carrying potential life imprisonment, unpardona by state exposure, and contempt of court liability. The legal framework is straightforward. Title 18 U.S.C. 1519 criminalizes falsification. What backdating constitutes. October 8 email establishes intent. Title 18 U.S.C. 1512 addresses obstruction through record alteration. Backdating meets every element. Guidelines consider position abuse as aggravating factor. Most dangerous. Title 18 U.S.C. 242 criminalizes rights deprivation when officials willfully violate protections. Proceeding after discovery satisfies standard. Torres case. 3 defendants. 3 counts. 60 years consecutive. Standard for systematic violations before Congress. Precedent exists. Federal judges sentence officials to decades for lesser violations. 2019. Prosecutor got 12 years for less systematic misconduct than Pam Bondi's backdating. Difference: not Attorney General with constitutional duty to uphold violated law. Documented before Congress.